everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and joining me on the show, it has been a little while, the resident fantasy football expert of our show from WGR 550 in Buffalo, ADP Chasing, and the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast. I still remember Mike Schopp. Welcome back to the show, my friend. We are officially entering fantasy draft season, so must be an exciting time for you.
There is no, just like with the NFL itself, there's really no discontinuation of fantasy draft season. We're drafting for next year before the Super Bowl is played. Then we have our ubiquitous never too early tournaments that lead up to the draft. And then how could you draft before the real draft? Well, you just use the information you have. And then once the NFL draft happens, then it's like really on. You get Best Ball Mania 6 on Underdog this year, and there are just countless tournaments over there. FFPC has some big ones. The main event is open as of this week for $2 million first prize, or $1 million first prize, I think it is, $2,000 entry. And DraftKings has its legions. So I'm very well, you'll tell me at the end if this proves to be true, well-versed in the fantasy streets so far in 2025, hopefully.
Well, you and I got into a draft right after the Super Bowl, I think, and we had like 24 hours to make each pick, and eventually by the end I did lose track of it, and then it just started drafting completely random players. No. But I am excited to be back in the Underdog world after a tough first season for me. I finished second in one league, and I was very thrilled by that. Thank you, Sam Darnold, as my last pick in that draft that pushed me to the top. But a new quarterback, a new sheriff in town for the Minnesota Vikings, JJ McCarthy. Of course, I want to get your attempt at a projection on JJ McCarthy, but let's talk about Justin Jefferson, because Justin Jefferson has gotten to the point where I felt like Larry Fitzgerald was this way. For a while there, the Arizona Cardinals were throwing out like John Skelton and Ryan Lindley or whatever, and Larry Fitzgerald would still get like 100 catches. It didn't matter. Do you think that he still deserves to be the top fantasy football wide receiver, maybe only behind Jamar Chase? Or with a quarterback that's never played before, are we a little bit more hesitant on projecting his numbers?
My shorter answer is yes. I'm not worried about Jefferson really at all for these types of things. I mean, what kind of concerns would Jamar Chase give you right now? Very few, if any. He's got the quarterback. It's proven. He's young. Like, with all the attention he got before, he still won. He led the league in everything, and T. Higgins is back. So Jamar Chase is, one of, like Jefferson, and even CeeDee Lamb, a number of guys where you can see just an outrageous ceiling. But with Chase, you feel like it's there. And Jefferson, I mean, for a guy who's still only 25, he's been through a lot at that position, for only playing for one team so far. Who knows at the end of it all how many quarterbacks Justin Jefferson will have racked up, so to speak. But I'm not worried about it. I like McCarthy enough, intelligence and that coach, for me to feel really good about that Jefferson will not be a decoy to any extent in that offense. So I think I'm getting what I've been getting. He goes between 3 and 6 in most Underdog drafts. Once in a while, you see a 102. I don't think I've seen a 101, and I don't think I've seen anything lower than 6. You've got Chase, Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Jefferson, Gibbs, Lamb. That's kind of your top 6. It'll be interesting to see if Ashton Genty breaks through that ceiling, or even Christian McCaffrey. And after that, you've got 6 or 8 receivers that everybody likes. But Jefferson is still looked at as a tier above Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors. I mean, very good players. And I think that's just, a general confidence that he's quarterback proof, so to speak. And if you like McCarthy, who's quarterback 20 in Underdog rankings, not terrible for a guy who's never taken a snap in the league, then you're going to like Jefferson even more.
I'm curious about how Jefferson's numbers change a little bit. I mean, so far in his career, they kind of haven't. Like, he usually averages about 14 or 15 yards per catch. He gets a million targets, and it's shifted a little bit. I mean, in 2022, they were playing every single game was a shootout to the very last moment.
The best.
And he's racking up more stats, right? That's the dream, is the quarterback throwing 700 passes because you have to try to win every game in the last moments. That was not so much the case last year, where the Vikings in the beginning of the season got off to so many leads. They were handing it off a lot. And there were full games where teams took 2 or sometimes 3 players and tried to cover Justin Jefferson. And then Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson went off, especially the game in Chicago, where it was just almost comedy to watch the film back and watch them just throw everyone at Justin Jefferson and then get smoked by all the other players. I assume that that's still going to be the case. Kevin O'Connell is very much ready for that with his offense. And that's a good point, that O'Connell has built this entire ship around throwing the football to Justin Jefferson, just like was the case with Cooper Kupp in Los Angeles.
Right.
They're not going to be like, oh, well, let him be double covered so we could throw underneath to the running back or something like that. At the same time, I think JJ McCarthy is going to profile a little differently as a quarterback than Sam Darnold did. Sam Darnold did one thing super duper well, and that was whip that ball 40 yards down the field. And they would hunt deep plays all the time with him. When Cousins was the quarterback, there was a lot more action going on underneath, a lot more to TJ Hawkinson, and a lot more short stuff to Justin Jefferson. I think that his numbers for actual receptions could go up. It's already very high.
Yep.
Could go up, because I think McCarthy sees the underneath area of the field and is a little more comfortable with it than Sam Darnold, who was constantly just looking downfield.
And he doesn't want to take Jefferson out of the rotation. He doesn't want to reduce Jefferson's volume. So that would be the logical result, I think. Maybe it's good for Aaron Jones, who we're kind of all sleeping on. They signed Jordan Mason to an interesting contract. And, these older running backs in fantasy, nobody ever wants. But last year, if you didn't want them, you got killed because a lot of them did so well. But, yeah, I think, you'll know better than I what McCarthy's sort of profile is as a passer and what they want to get out of him. I know you're out at these practices all the time trying to get a read on that, among other things. But Jefferson, if you have a Sigmund Bloom, football guys, one of the GOATs, would say the law of optimal coaching. Does it apply? And I think on Minnesota, maybe at the very top of the list when it comes to the NFL, we think it does. They're going to do what we would do, right? That's not to say we would always make optimal decisions, but certainly from a fantasy standpoint, you want to be able to trust that Justin Jefferson will get fed, 10 or more targets a game. And the Ram comparison is a good one because Sean McVay carries the same sort of clout. Not when it comes to fourth down stuff where he's terrible, but in terms of getting guys open and doing all that, like he's one of the best too. And you want to be able to trust Puka in this case or Kupp in the past. So I think there's enough there to feel good about Jefferson with the quarterback change in a landscape where Puka, Lamb, Chase offer you more sort of what you think is known. It's never really known in football because of all the randomness and injuries. But I feel like Jefferson sort of overcomes that kind of scrutiny.
So we are going on quarterback. I think this will be the 4th quarterback. I don't count Josh Dobbs. He was hurt during Dobbs, and then Dobbs threw him one pass against the Raiders and got him hurt. And so he really never played with Josh Dobbs.
Right.
But with every single one of these quarterbacks, he's succeeded, which I think that Justin Jefferson might be the least interesting wide receiver who has ever risen to this caliber of success. And I mean that as a compliment, as in he doesn't have these ups and downs with different quarterbacks. He doesn't have meltdowns out on the field.
Right.
He doesn't have off-field sort of stuff. You just don't see, even in weeks where it's tough for him, you could see his frustration growing. But then he'll lay a key block or something to help spring a screen pass and win a game. I feel like I've never come across a wide receiver, because it's a position that you can run 35 routes in a game and get 2 footballs, and that's got to be really frustrating. I feel like I've never seen a receiver be able to work his way through the ups and downs of that position, work his way through other quarterbacks, work his way through multiple coaches now to be as consistent as he has been.
Yeah, I mean, he is sort of a not fitting exactly with the positional stereotype in that way. Like, he's not a two technique defensive tackle that you just never even think about. But I think that's all to his credit. I mean, the Vikings have had enough success where he really hasn't been challenged so much in that way, where you're a star, the team is losing. Why? And that would be something this year that would manifest, I think, if it doesn't go well. I'm not predicting that it won't. They won 14 games last year, though, so the bar is pretty high. But I know in fantasy, we all still love the player, bottom line.
The Football Power Index from ESPN does not love the Vikings as much as some other folks. Sometimes I've gotten to the point where with all projections, I'm like, is every single projection outside of 2 or 3 teams 8.7 wins? That's kind of what it feels like. But let's talk about running backs. And Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason are the Vikings backfield, but let's expand this out into the bigger conversation. Mm-hmm. I am interested in your opinion of Jones and Mason as a backfield. But the running back position last year just smoked you. You were thinking, I'll just wait on running backs. These old guys, they can't do it anymore. But you know what? Sometimes guys in their late 20s find it, or find the best offensive line, or find a quarterback who's also a runner, which impacts the running back as well. It was a fascinating year for running backs last year, including Aaron Jones, who, if you had told me before the season was going to set his career high in touches, I'd have been like, okay, there's no way he makes it through 17 games. I think it's a fascinating landscape going into this year.
Exactly. One thing I would say to preface this about last year is you were all over, just don't bet on Ty Chandler. And, you know, in fantasy, you're looking for those back doors. You're looking for those. Mason is this for the Vikings this year, but he got paid. Like, I'm not sure it's the best example. Guys where if you're one injury away from a potential bell cow role, and at the running back position, we sort of know that backup can be about as productive as the starter, no matter how good the starter is. Whereas at wide receiver, that never will happen. If Jefferson goes out, whoever replaces him is not doing anything. So that's sort of the running back, mantra, I guess. It's a matter of staying healthy, and the bet is that they don't. And last year they did. That was mostly Jones. That was quintessentially, again, James Conner in Arizona. That was Kamara. That was Mixon. Of course, that was Barkley. Of course, that was Derrick Henry. And, historically, you just don't expect older running backs to be so durable and then productive. And the combination of the teams that Barkley and Henry went to, and even Mixon going to a new team, and they were a little bit dysfunctional, but it didn't get you crushed. Josh Jacobs, another name for this, new team in Green Bay, and he did great. So it's a different year. Every year is some part reacting to last year. And I think so far this year, I was kind of hoping that drafters would be more infatuated with last year and want to sort of double down on that happening. Like Henry, for one, who I never draft, and it hasn't exactly worked out for me, but Henry goes in the second round, early to mid second round. And if, like, for one example, if I thought maybe the market was more sort of obsessed with last year, like last year meant something had changed, then Henry would be a first round pick. Like, why would you not do that? He's Derrick Henry, it's Baltimore, etc. But that's not really happening. So I don't know. I think it's sort of it's a good sign, I think, for the efficiency of the market, which is not good if you're trying to win. I think everybody's more sophisticated than ever for a combination of reasons. There's so much good content. Much of it is free. The sites, starting with Underdog, leading the way easily, are just so easy to use and fun and affordable. I'm in some $3 drafts right now, the Schnauzer. So there's that. And really just fans, I think, Matthew, overall have become more sophisticated, partly due to the likes of yourself, where you're offering football content in a way. You wrote the book on PFF, literally. You're offering content in a way that's more data-driven, And I think young people relate to that. And that's who's playing, so most of who's playing fantasy football. So all of it together makes winning harder.
Yeah, and just tying that with the running back position, I also think that folks are probably smart enough to not overreact too much to last year. That there were a few examples that popped, but if you take out those couple examples, if it's aside from a historic season from Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry doing it into his age, we get a lot of the same results that usually pop up. There's guys that get injured or situation, offensive line, how the offensive works out dictates the player's success, maybe more than the actual player. So I think that most people will probably stay the course on this. I would be a little bit nervous about drafting someone like Saquon Barkley because of what happened to Christian McCaffrey. And maybe that's not fair, but McCaffrey got all that workload, went to the Super Bowl, and then it's injured the very next season. And Barkley is not without an injury rap sheet. I mean, he has been banged up throughout his career. And it was one of the things that I thought going into last year, like, oh, well, that's a good pickup for Philly, but he kind of gets banged up a lot and we'll see. And then, of course, he has, a historic season there. What are we supposed to make of McCaffrey, though, this year? Because I was looking at some fantasy rankings that had him fourth ahead of Ashton Genty. But Ashton Genty is, brand new, fresh, and also the running back who is clearly going to be leaned on no matter what. Like hell or high water, they're going to give Ashton Genty the football. You don't draft a guy that high and then be like, I don't know, we'll see. So that comparison, those two being back-to-back in this list I'm looking at, really popped to me because McCaffrey seems super risky, and Genty seems like the most obvious, this guy's going to get 1,000,000 yards player.
Yeah, it's a really good one. You don't draft a running back that early and not lean into him unless you're Atlanta, and then you sort of give Tyler Algier half the work. The way I do it in a vacuum, I would always draft Genty over McCaffrey because of the age. And I like the Raiders setup. You don't have to, but Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, Geno Smith, let's go. I feel like that could be really good. And they should do what you said. And I think they probably will, which is give Genty the lion's share of the work. So great. McCaffrey has had the same situation in his career. If he's healthy, then there's certainly a scenario where he puts down another great season. If that's a big if. It always is, even for a rookie. Breece Hall went out his rookie year with an ACL and you can't know. But on ADP chasing yesterday, we talked about McCaffrey quite a lot because my guys think that really we did Genty the same way the week before, that both are they're probably going to rise in drafts. They've been going late first, early second, especially McCaffrey. Genty's been going above McCaffrey, but McCaffrey is like late second. And even today, I was in a few and I noticed him going up. Those guys have a lot of power in moving the markets from time to time. But they kind of think, in general, Pat Crane, I'm thinking of mostly, that McCaffrey is going to become more expensive. And it's easy to understand why. I mean, it's San Francisco with Purdy signed and Kittle is there. Ayuk eventually comes back. It's the Niners. But I'm excited about the Raider thing. And I would put, if I did rankings, Genty would be above McCaffrey for me. He'd come closer to Gibbs than he would to McCaffrey because, well, as good as Gibbs was, they lose Ben Johnson. And I don't know, like as good as he was and is, Montgomery's still there. I'm a little bit not worried, but just a little bit less sure that he can have the same year, which is to say what? I mean, he was like the most consistently great running back in fantasy last year. So Gibbs comes in just above Genty for me, and then McCaffrey would be, I guess that's what, running back 5.
And that offensive line, they did lose Kevin Zeitler, who was one of the better run blockers in the entire league last year. And I was surprised that they didn't find a way to keep him, or I don't know, maybe he didn't want to stay. But that was, I think, a big loss for them. I also feel like play caller and running back are so tied together. I mean, when Gary Kubiak is here with the Vikings, like, you know that they're running for 1,000,000 yards and that the run scheme is going to be great. And we kind of go through this all the time with Kevin O'Connell of, is there enough of a commitment to the run with him to ever put up these big numbers. And I did want to circle back on Jordan Mason because last year, and we'll see how things play out. Last year, I was very, very tentative on Ty Chandler because I thought, I'm not sure that they're going to trust him. They tend to lean into their veterans. They play on the defensive side. They play Harrison Smith every single snap, despite what they say in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did that with Aaron Jones until they went out and got Cam Akers. But I think that they really wanted Jordan Mason. Like, they targeted him. They traded something for him. They paid him extra money. And he averaged 5 yards a carry and smoked the Vikings last year when they played against them, which is always one of the fun things, right? When a team gets beat up by a guy, but he was good against everybody. And Aaron Jones, I know that the Vikings do everything with him. It's like a bionic man situation or whatever with him to get him on the field. But I do think they want to mix and match those guys, especially when it comes to short yardage and goal line, which would be important for the fantasy folks. Last year, Jerome Bettis, Ironhead Hayward, Bo Jackson, none of those guys could have gotten the end zone for the Vikings last year. The offensive line was so bad at getting a push in short yardage, nobody was getting into the end zone. Refrigerator Perry would have been stuffed in the backfield. There's just no way it's happening. This year, they went out and got Mason and 3 new interior offensive linemen to be able to score in those situations. So I think Mason's going to be that guy. So I wanted to ask about players who are on new teams that have caught your eye, that now anytime a situation changes, it becomes very interesting. So I wanted to begin that discussion with Deebo Samuel because he is on the Vikings schedule this year. They play against Washington. I always wondered what to think about Deebo Samuel just in general. Like, we love this guy. We always love this guy. Like, Percy Harvin is this guy. Hey, he lines up in the backfield. It's so exciting. He does all this different stuff. But Samuel was never a great route runner, you're not going to run him 40 yards down the field and he just goes past somebody and you throw him a deep ball. And I wonder with the years that have been put on that body, if he's that same guy, because he's got kind of running back years to him, maybe a little bit more than any other wide receiver. Did you ever see the clip of Tyler Lockett put together where he would catch the ball and just fall down and just like make sure he was never hit? Well, that's not Deebo Samuel. He's the exact opposite. He's a pinball. So I'm a little bit skeptical on that. I like that move for them as an idea, but I don't know if I love Deebo Samuel there as in a guy who's going to be their wide receiver 2 and get 1 million catches, or if he's going to be on the field.
Yeah, I'm mostly with you. I think about the mileage on Samuel, the wear and tear. I feel like with San Francisco, again, like you said, everybody loves Deebo Samuel, and he's been great. But what do you see if you close your eyes and picture Deebo Samuel playing for San Francisco? It's something over the middle or in the backfield, and then like there's nobody else on the screen, and he runs for 50 yards. Like it's just sort of, it's the Niners. They're just able. He's a witch to sort of open space up for anybody. And I don't know if that's Cliff Kingsbury. It's probably worth respecting. I mean, they traded for him. He's not cheap. And they really just do not have anybody that sort of comes to mind as a number 2 guy, as a pass catcher. Even like Zach Ertz, if you include tight ends, is ancient. So there's a chance. I mean, if Samuel, they should scheme him up, and it's Jane Daniels. So, and Kingsbury isn't, the worst. Like if he's able to hang in there physically, then there's a good season in there. I don't know if it's great. I get a little bit confused by Washington in drafts because Daniels is a 4th round pick, and that's not confusing. Like the running, how great he was right out of the box last year, but McLaurin goes before that. And if you don't get McLaurin and Daniels, and they kind of go on other sides of the draft board, then what do you do? If it's Deebo or bust, kind of, because you want to have some correlation to win these big tournaments. And Deebo's not an easy click for me. So that ends up leading to Daniels not being on many of my teams, which I don't like. So, I mean, even the running back thing is the same. I think Samuel is a fine pick where he goes. Is that like round 7 or 8, maybe? I'm not looking at it. I don't think there's anything bad about that. But I doubt that there's like a really special year there.
And I'm a little bit curious about Cliff Kingsbury just in general, because last year they had a good second half of the season. They went to the NFC Championship. So we just went, oh, it was all fake. Like all the Cliff Kingsbury stuff, it was just wrong, right? And I don't know if we need to throw out all of the reputation that he built in Arizona just because they were able to win some games down the stretch. I mean, I think Jaden Daniels might be so good that he just transcends any offensive coordinator, no matter what is out there, kind of in Josh Allen-like fashion.
Right.
Like it doesn't really matter who it is. But I also do wonder about like just in terms of how that ball gets distributed, the passing game in general. It became a little bit repetitive in Arizona when DeAndre Hopkins was there. So does it pump the ball to the number one over and over and over? Like, is that what the offense is supposed to be? And then Deebo Samuel is left kind of unhappy? Or is it going to be that Deebo Samuel is so much of an underneath wide receiver that they want to get the ball out quickly and they don't want to get Jaden Daniels hit too often? Like they were doing a lot of that last year. So I guess I could go either way on that. I'm just with him. He always seems like he's playing banged up. It's like limited in practice. Deebo Samuel is something you see every single week, almost.
It is interesting. Always, I mean, fascinating how the narratives shift as guys move around and, you know, seasons come and go. Because in Arizona, Kingsbury was just a punchline. And you had Kyler Murray kind of screaming at him on the sideline, and just it looked so bad. And then he leaves, falls into Daniels, and that happens. NFC Championship, Offensive Rookie of the Year, all of that. And Murray is kind of still Murray, I think, where it just feels like everything is just such hard work. And the Allen comparison with Daniels is the one I was thinking of too, because in talking about this every day in Buffalo, like I do, when Brian Daboll became the offensive coordinator, I'm like, okay, well, he's a name, but what has he ever had a good offense that didn't have Tom Brady? Like where's the 1 year where his offense like really popped and they didn't have one of the best ever? Notice I didn't say the best. So that made me skeptical of Daboll, but Allen happened. And what Daboll, not to sell him short, but really what I think he did right the most was use play action, use motion, use the cheat code stuff that coaches are sometimes sort of like not on board with because, you know, they want to establish the run or something. And that helped elevate the Bills offense to the very top. So I don't know if Kingsbury is exactly that. Daniels, it was a player and a team I didn't end up seeing a lot, Washington, but it had to be amazing. What I did was great, spectacular. And it just wasn't a team that I really feel like I have got the best handle on, Washington. But, you know, again, I think Samuel is fine where he goes.
Just a little aside, I think the best thing in sports for sports fans is when that great player, truly great player, starts to ascend as that person. Like it's the most exciting because they don't have the true expectations yet. Because once you get there, now it's, well, if you're not in the NFC Championship next year, then you've disappointed everyone. We kind of went through that with Anthony Edwards a little bit here with the Timberwolves, where watching him ascend last year was the most fun anybody had. But now that they're down 3-1 in the Western Conference Final, well, now it's, well, Anthony Edwards isn't doing enough. And look at, I mean, there's a very short window, and we'll see if we have this with JJ McCarthy, a very short window of just purely being ecstatic about somebody taking that step, which must have been what it was like for Washington fans to see him, Jaden Daniels last year. How about, you know, the quarterback position is really dominated by, hey, this guy was drafted last year. What's he's going to be? You know, and we're talking about Jaden Daniels, but this is Caleb Williams. This is Michael Penix. This is JJ McCarthy. There's really not a lot of, hey, this quarterback is brand new with this team. Mm-hmm. I was looking through the list going like, is there who, like Justin Fields with the Jets is new with the team? Is he the most interesting new guy on a team as long as Aaron Rodgers stays retired or whatever? I mean, even then, is that interesting? Probably not. So to me, it's all about that 2024 draft class. And even Bo Nix had a good second half of the year. Got to respect Bo for sneaking 4 touchdown passes against the Kansas City Chiefs, who weren't playing their starters to, you know, help his stats a little bit. But where do you stand on what to do with the 2024 draft class guys?
Yeah, it's a good point. Knicks ended up that Chiefs game merchant that he is with more passing yards, touchdown passes, and a better completion percentage than Josh Allen, who I think won the MVP. So I don't know what the voters were thinking, but yes, a lot of teams are they're sort of like locked in on their guys right now. I mean, Drake May, another one from last year that really wasn't that successful, but you can't find anybody who doesn't really like Drake May. Like they're not out. I don't know. I mean, maybe, sure, athlete. Okay. I don't disagree, but everybody's on board there. And what did he do? So you have him and the other, Knicks you got to as well. 6 guys from last year. I think for new team, Geno Smith again is my favorite this year, because as almost shocking as his return to a starting position in the league was, with the success he had, like nobody was really expecting Geno Smith to be so good. I still don't think he got enough credit. I mean, he was the most accurate passer in the league. And if he fits right with Chip Kelly, and you've got Bowers, who was 3rd in the NFL last year in receptions as a rookie tight end, chasing Jefferson above him, that's it. If you got that guy, Myers is fine, right? He's pretty reliable and shorter stuff. Like you can get a year out of Jacoby Myers, and Genty pops, then you could have a really interesting thing there, which we have not seen from the Raiders in a long time. So Caleb Williams is the one from last year. I mean, McCarthy, sure, he didn't play at all, but he's got the right coach, and you want to think now that Williams does too. Maybe Vikings fans don't want to think this, but the league wants to think that no more excuses for Caleb Williams. And we'll see, because speaking of Fields, a lot of his metrics when it came to sacks and, getting rid of the ball were the absolute worst in the league. And that was Fields. Like Fields' thing is he just doesn't sort of get there fast enough. And I don't know, that could be Caleb Williams too. It was as a rookie. You got to be real about that. And there are excuses to be made for him, but maybe not anymore. So, and you could get a big jump from him and still have people go, yeah, but he was not the first. He shouldn't have been the first overall pick. I mean, because Daniels set such a high bar last year. So that'll be a really interesting one. Maybe right at the top of the list this year is Chicago. They provided him last year as a rookie the so-called best setup ever for a 101 with DJ Moore, Odunze, Keenan Allen, Kmet even, Swift even, and it was a disaster with their coaches. We have the book now with Caleb Williams where he didn't want to go to Chicago and maybe Minnesota. And, he was right. The setup was really just not ideal for him from a coaching standpoint. No excuses anymore.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that Minnesota has over Chicago. Much more sunny days per year and much better traffic. The traffic in Chicago is an absolute nightmare, so I get it. Oh, and the coach. The coach is way better. And the top receiver is way better. And probably the second receiver, too. So, no, I get it. That was actually not the part of the whole thing that was concerning to me. It was sort of obvious that everyone would rather play for Kevin O'Connell than Matt Eberflus, and that everyone would rather have Justin Jefferson than any other person on earth to catch the football for you. It was really all the stuff about, well, one, that you would even tell anyone that. I don't know why you would say that out loud. Also, every single number one player, you're never going to believe this, goes to a crappy team. It's shocking, I know, but like Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, you're never going to be the first overall pick in the draft and just get to play for Kyle Shanahan's 49ers and in their peak, right? But I thought it was the stuff about the film, because that just sounded like excuse making to me. And that's where that always sets off red flags, when it's almost like the guy, or his dad in this case, is trying to rationalize why he couldn't play good at football. And what I want to see from him, and this is an interesting thing. Do you think that it can be taught to see the field? Because, I mean, Sam Darnold saw the field better last year than he ever did before because of everything he had around him. And that was always my Sam Darnold things. Like, I don't think he sees the field very well. But Caleb Williams is shorter than Sam Darnold by a lot. and he was just ducking his eyes, bringing his eyes down. It didn't look like he saw anything. And when I watched the film back of the 2 games against the Vikings, he made some spectacular plays. But you're like, dude, it's right there. Like Keenan Allen is right there wide open and you're not seeing him. That to me is a very, very hard thing to fix.
Yeah, I don't know better. Like that could be right. And maybe it's a little bit of, not by scouts probably, but fantasy, maybe it's a trait that we sort of take for granted. We let the draft capital be our guide and, look at the talent. It should work. And there were definitely a lot of believers in Caleb Williams as a fantasy quarterback last year, and that did not work out. So, he still has a lot to prove. That's saying the least.
I think if you're drafting him in fantasy, you're saying, I'm just rolling these dice. I'm not playing this safe. I'm just going for it.
You're betting on Ben Johnson, right? Like you're betting on, I don't even know if I got to it before talking about their surrounding talent. What did they do this year? They just doubled down. They went Colston Loveland as another tight end. They have Kmet, so in over him, and then Luther Burden early in the second round. What they didn't do ever is get to a running back to probably replace DeAndre Swift, which is interesting because Swift, this also we got into on ADP chasing yesterday, has been a guy where the discourse has been around whether his coaches really like him or his coaches trust him. He wants to turn everything into a touchdown and won't just sort of take the 5 yards. So here you have a new coach there who's going to be able to, he's going to have the authority to put his stamp on everything. And he had Swift in Detroit, and they didn't do anything there. They reportedly wanted to. It was the Patriots' pick of Travion Henderson, and the Bears were in that mix. But the bottom line is they didn't, which makes Swift an interesting choice in fantasy. And, I mean, nobody's ever really liked DeAndre Swift, but he's pick 81, and you can get a running back on that offense who probably is, not 3 downs necessarily, but on the field a lot. That's a pretty good deal, I think.
I think I would be looking at, is it Rashawn Johnson is their backup a little bit really late because no one's going to pick him. But DeAndre Swift always gets benched by everyone who ever has him. And there's been a few games where DeAndre Swift destroyed the Minnesota Vikings. He has, he's really quick and really physically gifted and can catch the ball out of the backfield. But it's the Ty Chandler thing where if the coaches don't trust you, you're not going to play. And you could see Ben Johnson getting frustrated there and then trying somebody else and going to Rashawn Johnson, who I thought was a good prospect, like a middle round guy that sometimes pops, but he had put up really good numbers on that same offense that Bijan Robinson was on. So that's getting a little too deep into the weeds. May 28th as we're recording.
No, not for my taste. I mean,
not for you.
We talked Rashawn Johnson yesterday also. He's a little bit of a riser because the air is clear in Chicago. No rookie. I mean, there's so many of these rookies, Matthew, that went on Saturday that most analysts really liked. Some of these analysts anyway did. They all had their favorites. And a guy like Damian Martinez, who would get mocked in like round 3 or round 4, doesn't go at all, or round 7, whatever he was, Seattle. And the Bears just never touched it. So Swift and Johnson should be, I mean, they look like pretty good values at this point. They could always just bring in J.K. Dobbins and then whoops. But that hasn't happened yet.
So just a couple other things that you touched on. I love the Raiders from I can't wait till they're on Red Zone when I have, Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football games and I get to sit and watch Red Zone with everybody else. I can't wait till the Raiders pop up because I think they're going to be real life fun, but not actually great as a football team. Geno Smith is one where the film people always love Geno Smith. And then you watch a game like I did last year in Seattle of Geno, and then you get it. Like you understand why he's kind of been a Kirk Cousins level quarterback because there's just these crazed decisions that he makes. And I think that the crazed decisions that work out, everyone watches back and go, wow, I can't believe he got that tight window throw in there. But there's enough crazed decisions that don't work out. But that's also what makes him really fun. And I think he's going to put up 4,500 yards. He's going to throw like crazy, and that's going to be a very entertaining team. I am very in on Drake May being a great quarterback. Last year, I thought that the setup that he had was probably one of the worst I've ever seen in my life. Like, I mean, okay, the Urban Meyer thing where he's, physically assaulting kickers and stuff. All right, that's an exception. But Trevor Lawrence didn't even play very well under those circumstances. Drake May had an amateur coach who had never done it before, no wide receivers whatsoever, no running game really to speak of. The offensive line was a comedy act. So now they've got a real head coach who has won before and knows what he's doing. They have completely overhauled the line. They've brought in wide receivers. Stephon Diggs is apparently dating Cardi B, which I, saw on Twitter, and I don't know what that means. But I just think that this is one of those, he gets to take the big step with everything around him improving. And I felt like him surviving that alone said a lot to me, because we've seen, and Sam Darnold's one of them, we've seen really good quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield, under those circumstances, just completely melt. So the fact that he was competing in games and making plays and doing stuff, I was like, oh, I'm in. I'm interested.
Yeah, me too. Raiders Patriots week 1. So you want that red zone game. You're playing Monday night. We're playing Sunday night. We both should be able to find that game somewhere Sunday, 1:00 in the opener. The Raiders have the Monday night game in week 2, by the way, with the Chargers. Yeah. I'm optimistic there, but again, like I said before, like I can't find anybody who sort of isn't on May, and it scares me a little bit because we just really haven't seen a lot yet. But so dysfunctional last year, this is not to take the players off the hook, but they drafted receivers in rounds 2 and 4 and got nothing. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, they got nothing there. We still had Kendrick Bourne doing things, Pop Douglas, like there's a Keyshawn Boutte, like there's a list with the Patriots. This year, they brought in Kyle Williams from Washington State in the draft, and he had his fans. He kind of came on in the pre-draft discourse. So, and Diggs, I mean, the Patriots could sort of rank their receiver room a lot of different ways, but Diggs is a known commodity, and Williams is promising. Maybe then a Douglas, who's had flashes in the league, becomes like relevant fantasy-wise as a wide receiver 3 or something, and then you are, you're cooking a little bit. Running back, Travion Henderson, good pass-catching option too. That helps. I don't think Ramondre Stevenson is dead there. They even also have Antonio Gibson. The Patriots are a tough team. 10 different people would rank their skill position guys 10 different ways. Probably the answer, as always, is Hunter Henry for just his kind of high floor production at tight end. But yeah, they should. Everybody seems to like not just May, but the Patriots this year to be improved.
Okay, so before I end the show by asking you to give me a JJ McCarthy stat line, so you could think about that for a second.
Okay.
What else has been on your mind? I mean, you're discussing this stuff on a daily basis with all the greatest fantasy and projecting minds in the world. What's the big conversation? Tell me it's not Kyle Pitts. I don't want to hear it.
It's not Kyle Pitts. I think, and I'm not really the one to say this because I mean I'm sort of adjacent to some of these guys who max out tournaments and are really like the full-time experts in the field. I'm quasi somewhat that, but somewhat a host, and I sort of somehow have a seat at the table. But I think right now what a lot of the top players are trying to figure out and are executing is team structure. So it's more of like a fantasy geek kind of a point, but the best drafters are drafting in the first round with the 12th round in mind, or maybe the 18th, maybe not the 18th, but what happens to the rest of my team if I draft a running back at pick 10 or a receiver? Do I want the elite tight end in Bowers? Do I want the elite quarterback in Lamar Jackson or Allen? And those decisions have consequences. I mean, you're not going to need as many quarterbacks or tight ends at the end if you do that, but I like the tight ends at the end of these drafts, and I kind of, as much as I like Bowers, don't hate drafting Hunter Henry 3 times at the end or something. Like, so that's really, I think, where we're at on the calendar is we've got the schedule now, and the so-called experts, I don't mean that pejoratively, have figured out all the playoff week matchups. I could tell you week 17. I mean, I kind of know it. Isn't it Detroit, Minnesota in week 17? So there's that because that's the big money week. You have that in mind. But you're really just trying to figure out where are the ebbs and flows at each position? And then what do I do about it? I think Pat made the point yesterday. We're talking about McCaffrey, and also Genty applies here, where sure, they make sense. McCaffrey's going early second, probably deserving of mid to late first. But if I do that, do I get stuck at receiver? Because by the time you get to round 6, you don't like any of the receivers anymore. That's just how underdog life is. Everybody's receiver thirsty over there. That's really what's on my mind, is trying to figure out, and this only comes from reps. I mean, you start drafts different ways. You want to get in the $3 one or the cheaper ones, just to sort of get a feel for the way teams draft are not that different. $3 to the Best Ball Mania 25 and so on. You want to get a feel for, where am I going to get stuck if I do X, Y, or Z? And that is the essence of good drafting, I think, being able to know right from the beginning, which is different than like a real NFL draft, because there you just, you're not really worried about who's available in round 5 when you're picking in the first round. That, I think, is the art of it all, is trying to master that. And then on top of that, and I'll keep this short, but these same guys I'm talking about that I'm learning from are maxing out tournaments. So they won't pick by their rankings every draft, because they don't want 50% of Brock Bowers and 0% AJ Brown or something like that. So there's also that game that gets played, and the correlation aspect within that too. If I draft AJ Brown early, they play Buffalo in week 17, so that could be a shootout game. I want to make sure I get to Shakir or Kincaid or whoever it is, to give myself a chance. If I'm lucky enough to make it to that final week, I've got a path to victory for 7 figures if the Philadelphia-Buffalo game happens to be the one that shoots out, for example.
Well, one thing I learned from you last year is that there are definitely levels to this game of fantasy football, and that was a pretty deep level for me. But I have a new approach to this year. Last year it was very much scattershot, so I have learned about organizing and preparing before doing the draft, rather than just, that guy's on the board, I'll take him. Mm-hmm. Which, sometimes worked and sometimes did not. But we got plans for this year, and I think Underdog will be returning to us for this year, so that should be very fun.
Great.
Okay, give me the JJ McCarthy stat line.
Well, I don't really sort of think like this, because I'm thinking more in terms of rankings. I mentioned before he's quarterback 20, which is, I think respectable for what people are thinking he'll be. I've got Kevin O'Connell, so I don't think I'll be light on volume. What's good here? 3,500 yards? What does that put McCarthy? 3,500, 24, and 7 as a rookie. How does that sound?
That sounds a little bit safer than our friend Ian Hartitz, who I think went 3,900 with 31 touchdowns. I think that the touchdown number could be lower just because they're going to run the ball more at the goal line, which, little things like that can adjust your touchdown and interception ratio.
Right.
I don't think he's going to throw a ton of picks. Probably there will be, because he's a rookie, there will be rookie moments with the interceptions, but I think the yardage total is a little low there, and they're going to have to throw. They have a lot of great quarterbacks on their schedule. So when you're playing Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, you're going to have some shootouts that you have to win, and you have to get yards from your quarterback. I might push that number up a little closer to 4,000, but aside from that, 24 and 7 seems pretty good to me.
The MVP in 2024 went 3,700, 28 and 6. Also ran for 12.
Yeah.
Which didn't hurt. So you'd take that, right? You'd take Josh Allen's 2024, but even without the rushing, for JJ McCarthy as a rookie, essentially a rookie.
If he does the Bo Nix type of season, even take away those 4 touchdowns at the end, where there's some serious bumps in the road and some games where you're like, what the heck, Bo Nix? But then the light comes on and they've won enough games. You can have a really good season with the rest of this team because of everybody around them. I think they're a much better team than Denver was last year as a complete team, and Denver was there in the playoffs.
There's a tug of war in my mind with McCarthy, because you've got O'Connell and Jefferson and those forces, but also what was like everybody's take on him before he was drafted, which was like they never really passed at Michigan. So is that because of his limitations, or is that because they won all the time and didn't need it? So that's why my instinct was to shoot a little lower on him as a rookie. Again, sorry for rookie. I don't know if you're calling him one. He's probably not technically one.
Yeah, I've sort of railed against that because when you have an entire year of like training camp, preseason, knowing the offense, seeing what it's like behind the scenes, not having to come straight from the combine and workouts and stuff, it is quite a bit different. But first year, the what we've been using is first year starting quarterback or unproven is also fine.
Well, how would you compare it with Mahomes? I mean, Mahomes played one garbage game at the end and he wasn't injured, but so he would have been on the field, but still like it was that plus everything else would be the same with what McCarthy was able to gain from being at the facility, etc.
I certainly think that the practice helps a lot during the regular season, being able to practice every single day, get to know your teammates, get to know the offense, but call it like 70% of that, because most of your time as a backup quarterback is spent in meeting rooms anyway,
right,
and watching the starter anyway. And some of the best experience I think he had was he was on the sideline with the headset on, listening to the calls go into Sam Darnold and then watching Sam go execute it. And the other thing that he went through that I think players cannot prepare themselves for, when you come out of the draft, everyone is just so hyped for you. Everyone in your circle, you're going to dominate the league. You're going to run over the NFL. You're going to crush all this sort of stuff. And then they arrive and it is so hard to be good in the NFL. And I think what McCarthy was able to see was how truly hard it is. And the scrutiny that goes along with it, because Sam Darnold had a really terrible game against Jacksonville. They won the game to go 7-2. And there's major Twitter account people saying he should be benched and they should sign Ryan Tannehill. The next day, with the ESPN, he's turning back into a pumpkin. This is the same old Sam Darnold also. And you're 7-2 and like then playing really, really well. And you're still getting demolished by everybody. And then the playoff game too. That's the level. If you want to win a Super Bowl, that's that Rams defensive line. That's what you have to face. I don't think guys have any concept of that when they come in. That just as much as sitting down with O'Connell each week, going through the game planning process as if he was playing. I think all of that is super important to McCarthy. So I think it's 70 or 75% of what Mahomes got, which is why I would be fairly confident that he can do this just because we haven't seen him. And the other part of it too is this happens in basketball sometimes where it's like, well, this guy can't shoot threes. Like, well, did he shoot threes like in college or whatever? Well, no, he didn't. But it doesn't necessarily mean he can't, right? Mm-hmm. It just means that he hasn't. And so, a better example is Justin Jefferson is an outside wide receiver. Well, he can't play outside wide receiver because he didn't play that in college. Well, it doesn't mean he can. It just means he didn't.
Means he didn't. Kenneth Walker and catching passes out of the backfield at Michigan State. Never did it. Does that mean he can't do it? I don't know. What's the answer on that, actually?
Well, most passes are swing passes to running backs anyway. So,
yeah. Well, that's all you need.
Yeah, so always a very interesting conversation with you, Mike Schopp, ADP Chasing, the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast. And I'm just looking forward to next season. I know we haven't talked about it, but, getting into the fantasy last year was really fun for me to understand that world and think through a different lens. We had a lot of great conversations, so I'm happy we could do it again.
That's great. And I appreciate you letting me, even on that one last question, sort of talk about the strategy of it, because it is, I'm not the smartest guy, but I like a good intellectual challenge. I like puzzles. And for many years, I'm older than you. For many years, fantasy football did not interest me in the slightest. I had no appreciation for the level of depth in like the analysis and figuring it out. I would just sort of go by the app, which, can work. Anything can work. But I'm so impressed with the brain power in the fantasy space that it makes me excited to be a part of it. And I feel lucky in that way. So if any of your viewers want to get, more serious about fantasy, it's May. You have lots of time to sort of ramp up and try things and learn. Underdog has been a godsend for those people because there's so much available there. and it's not all expensive. I'm not saying you should want to do this, but if you do, there's just a ton of smart people out there. You mentioned Ian is another one who are doing great work and can really help you get good at it. And then you show up for your home league and they don't know what they're in for.
Right, exactly. No, the number of smart people doing projections in this world is so. I mean, our access to them is so much different than buying a single fantasy football magazine from years ago and taking a swing at it. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, well, I'm looking forward to another year of fantasy and a June and July of drafting.
Let's go.
We'll see how that goes. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.